Welcome to another Mallory Vance adventure. Get comfortable and let your mind set the stage as you enjoy Warehouse 17.
The city was a symphony of sirens and rain. A discordant melody played out on the slick black asphalt. My trench coat, perpetually damp, clung to me like a second skin, the weight of the fabric a familiar burden. The neon signs of the late-night diners and strip clubs bled into the rain-streaked windows of my Ford, casting a distorted, hallucinatory glow. The windshield wipers struggled against the deluge, their rhythmic squeaks barely keeping pace with the storm. I pulled into the curb, the engine groaning in protest, a weary beast, finally allowed to rest. The Nightingale, the sign flickered, its letters sputtering in and out of existence, a broken promise of warmth and music in the relentless downpour. Detective Mallory Vance, that was me. A name whispered in the precinct hallways, a reputation built on stubbornness and a nose for the truth, a truth often buried beneath layers of lies, half-truths, and the kind of deceit that clung to this city like the dampness in the air. I'd spent the better part of a decade navigating its underbelly, learning its rhythms, its tells, and tonight I was chasing a phantom, Clara Thorne. A jazz singer with a voice like honeyed whiskey. A woman who had vanished from the very bowels of the city without a trace. No note, no warning, just an empty apartment. A packed suitcase left behind, and a half-written song scrawled on sheet music stained with coffee rings. The kind of disappearance that didn't sit right, the kind that gnawed at the edges of my instincts. The Nightingale Club, a den of shadows. The double doors of the Nightingale swung open as I approached, releasing a wave of heat, cigarette smoke, and the heavy rhythmic thrum of a blues bass line. The air inside was thick, a tangible entity that pressed against my lungs, filling them with the scent of bourbon, sweat, and something faintly floral, perfume maybe, or the ghost of a memory. The club was a labyrinth of shadows and reflections, a place where secrets were whispered and deals were made under the cover of dim lighting and louder music. The stage, a crimson island in a sea of darkness, held a lone guitarist, his fingers weaving a mournful tale on the strings, his head bowed as if in prayer. I flashed my badge at the bouncer, a mountain of a man with a face that looked like it had been chiseled from granite and then left out in the weather too long. His name was Harkness, and he'd been working the door at the Nightingale since before I'd made detective. He grunted, barely glancing at the badge before jerking his chin toward a door tucked away behind the bar. Leo Fingers Falcone was waiting. His office was a cramped, dimly lit space, the air thick with the pungent aroma of stale cigars and aged scotch. The walls were lined with framed black and white photos of jazz legends, some signed, some faded with time. Leo himself sat behind a massive mahogany desk, his silver hair slicked back like a raven's wing, his fingers long, elegant, the hands of a pianist steepled in front of him. His eyes, dark and unreadable, held the weight of 1,000 untold stories. "Detective Vance," he rasped, his voice like sandpaper over old wounds. "Still chasing shadows?" I took the seat across from him without waiting for an invitation. The leather groaned beneath me, worn thin from years of use. "Clara Thorne didn't simply evaporate, Leo," I said, my voice flat. "She left behind a packed suitcase, a half-written song, and a void that screams foul play." Leo sighed, reaching for the decanter on his desk. The amber liquid inside caught the light as he poured himself 2 fingers, then hesitated, before tilting the bottle toward me in silent offer. I shook my head. He shrugged and took a slow sip, letting the scotch linger on his tongue before swallowing. "These singers," he murmured, swirling the glass. "They're like butterflies, flitting from one stage to another, chasing dreams that often turn to dust." "But butterflies don't leave their wings behind," I retorted, my gaze unwavering. "Tell me about her. Any arguments? Any unwanted attention?" Leo's eyes flickered, a momentary lapse in his carefully constructed facade. For a man who'd spent his life in the business of secrets, that flicker was as good as a confession. "Clara was talented," he said finally, a voice that could soothe a savage beast. "But she kept to herself, a solitary figure in a crowded room. No drama, no trouble." "Except for her disappearance," I pressed, my voice laced with suspicion. He shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes. "The city is a hungry beast, Detective. It devours dreams and spits out the bones. Perhaps Clara simply couldn't stomach it." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Cut the poetry, Leo. I need facts. Who was she seeing? Who was she afraid of?" For a long moment, he was silent. Then, with a sigh, he reached into his desk drawer and slid a photograph across the polished wood. It showed Clara, her dark hair spilling over one shoulder, standing beside a man with a scar running down the left side of his face. His eyes were cold, even in the grainy image. "His name is Victor Cray," Leo said quietly. "Used to be muscle for the Moretti family before they went down. These days he's freelance. Nasty piece of work. Started showing up here a few weeks ago, always when Clara was singing. They talked. Never looked friendly." I pocketed the photo. "You should have led with that." Leo's smile was thin. "Where's the fun in that?" I spent the next few hours navigating the labyrinth of the Nightingale, interviewing the staff, the musicians, the regulars. Each story was a piece of a puzzle, a fragment of a life lived in the shadows. The bartender, a woman named Rita with a sharp tongue and sharper eyes, remembered Clara nursing the same drink for hours, her gaze distant. "She wasn't just singing here," Rita said, polishing a glass with more force than necessary. "She was waiting for something, or someone." The drummer, a wiry guy named Dex, shrugged when I asked about Clara's last days. "She was jumpy, man. Like she kept looking over her shoulder. But hell, half the people in this place are running from something." Miles, the guitarist, was the most forthcoming, a young man with eyes that held a deep sadness. He'd been the one playing when I walked in. He set his guitar aside when I approached, his fingers still hovering over the strings as if reluctant to let go of the music. "She was working on a new song," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Something different, darker. She said it was about secrets buried deep." "Did she say what kind of secrets?" Miles shook his head. "No, but she was scared, Detective. Real scared. I heard her on the phone once, talking low, saying she knew about Lily. Whoever was on the other end didn't like that. Lily. The name stuck in my mind, a burr I couldn't shake. Blackwater Falls, a town with secrets. I left the Nightingale as the rain eased into a drizzle, the city lights reflecting in the puddles like fractured diamonds. The next day, I delved into Clara's past, tracing her steps back to a small, quiet town in upstate New York, Blackwater Falls, a place where time seemed to move at a slower pace, where secrets were buried beneath the surface of everyday life. Her old apartment, a small, tidy space above a bakery, held the echoes of her presence. The landlady, Mrs. Holloway, was a woman with a warm smile and kind eyes, the kind of person who remembered every tenant who'd ever passed through her doors. She was a sweet girl, Mrs. Holloway said, her voice tinged with sadness. Always singing, even when she was just doing the dishes. But she was haunted, I think, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Did she ever mention someone named Lily? I asked. The old woman's face tightened. Lily was her sister. Died years ago. Car accident, they said. But Clara never believed that. The silver locket. A hidden clue. In a dusty box in Clara's closet, I found a collection of her belongings. Faded photographs, a worn copy of Leaves of Grass, and a small silver locket. Inside, a picture of a young girl with bright, inquisitive eyes. On the back, an inscription. Always remember, Lily. Back in the city, I ran the name through the system, but came up empty. No death certificate, no police report, nothing. Like Lily Thorne had never existed. The song that was a code. I returned to the Nightingale after midnight, the stage now bare and silent, the red lights extinguished. Miles was there, practicing that same slow, melancholic melody. Lily, I said, holding up the locket. Does that name mean anything to you? Miles stopped playing, his eyes widening. Lily, that was the name of the song she was working on. The one about secrets. A jolt of adrenaline surged through me. The song, the secrets, the missing girl, it was all connected. I asked Miles to play the melody, the fragments he remembered. The tune was haunting, a slow, mournful progression, with a refrain that lingered like a ghost. I took the melody to a musicologist, an old friend named Elias Carter, who'd spent a lifetime decoding the language of music. He listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration, his fingers tapping against his desk in time with the notes. This isn't just a song, he said finally, his voice hushed. It's a code, a musical cipher. The intervals, the pauses, they correspond to letters. Hours later, he looked up, his eyes filled with a grim understanding. The song points to a location, he said. An old warehouse on the waterfront. Number 17, Warehouse 17. The warehouse was a relic of a bygone era. Its windows boarded up, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The air outside was thick with the brackish scent of the river, the sound of distant foghorns muffled by the mist. I moved through the darkness inside, my gun drawn, my senses heightened. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, the sound echoing through the cavernous space. Then I heard it. A faint whimper, a cry for help. In a dark corner, bound to a rusted pipe, was Clara. Her face was bruised, her lips cracked and dry, but her eyes widened when she saw me. Beside her, Victor Cray stood, his scarred face twisted into a sneer, a gun glinting in his hand. It's over, I said, my voice steady. Put the gun down. Cray turned, his face contorted with rage. She knows too much, he snarled. She has to be silenced. A struggle ensued, a desperate dance of life and death. Cray was strong, fueled by panic and violence, but I'd been in enough fights to know how they ended. A well-placed elbow to his ribs, a twist of his wrist, and the gun clattered to the ground. He lunged for it, but I was faster. The shot echoed through the warehouse, deafening in the confined space. Cray collapsed, his secrets dying with him. The truth about Lily. Clara, her body trembling, her eyes filled with gratitude, told me everything. Lily had been her sister, murdered years ago by a powerful politician, Senator Richard Voss, who'd been trafficking girls through Blackwater Falls. Lily had found out. And when Clara started digging, Voss sent Cray to shut her up for good. As I drove Clara back to the city, the rain finally ceased, and the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and gold. The city, washed clean by the storm, shimmered in the morning light. The ghosts of the past had been laid to rest, and in the silence, a new day was beginning.
You have been enjoying Warehouse 17, a Mallory Vance adventure. Join us for other Mallory Vance stories available where you found this one. Until next time.